My name is Lina. I was 17 when everything in my life started to feel too heavy. Every evening, I sat by the small window of our old house. From there, I could see the quiet street, the children running around, and the sky turning orange before night arrived. That window was my escape. When I looked outside, I could forget my mother's sickness, the constant medicine, and the fear of losing her. I tried to stay strong, but some days felt impossible. One cold evening, something happened that I will never forget. I was sitting in my usual place by the window when I noticed a boy walking slowly down the street. He looked tired, like he had been walking for hours. His clothes were worn and he carried a small backpack. I watched him with curiosity until he stopped under the streetlight and sat on the cold sidewalk. When he looked up, the light showed tears on his face. My heart tightened. I could not just sit there and watch. I opened the window gently and asked if he was all right. He looked up at me, surprised. He wiped his tears quickly and nodded, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He was not okay. Something inside me pushed me to go outside. I walked toward him and sat down a little distance away. I asked again. This time, he told me his name was Daniel, and that he had run away from home because his father treated him badly. He had no money, no plan, and nowhere to sleep. Hearing his voice shake made me feel his pain deep inside my chest. I knew what it meant to feel helpless. I took him inside. My mother, even though she was weak, welcomed him with kindness. The warmth of our home made Daniel cry again, and I realized how long it had been since someone cared about him. Days passed, then weeks. Daniel slowly became part of our small world. He helped me with everything: cooking, cleaning, and taking care of my mother. His presence filled the house with a softness we had lost for a long time. He made me laugh without trying. He made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. But life doesn't stop testing you. My mother's health got worse. The doctor said she needed treatment we couldn't afford. When he said that, it felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. I tried to stay calm for my mother, but inside I was breaking. One night, Daniel found me crying in the kitchen. I tried to hide my tears, but he gently held my hand, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I told him everything: my fear, my pain, my loneliness. He listened without saying a word, and when he finally spoke, he promised he would not leave me. He said he would find a way to help. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope. A small, fragile hope. But I didn't know that life was about to take everything in a direction I wasn't ready for. After that night in the kitchen, something changed between Daniel and me. He was still quiet, still gentle, but now there was a new kind of closeness, like we were carrying the same weight on our shoulders. Every morning he woke up before me, made breakfast, and checked on my mother. Sometimes I watched him from the doorway. He moved carefully, respectfully, as if our house was a fragile place he didn't want to break. And maybe it was. My mother liked him. Even on her weekdays, when she barely had the strength to sit up, she smiled whenever he entered the room. She said he brought light with him. I didn't tell Daniel that, but I saw how those words gave him comfort. He had been treated with anger for so long that kindness felt like something rare. But as days passed, her condition grew worse. She coughed more often. She slept longer. Her breathing sounded different, heavier. I tried to stay strong, but every time I looked at her, I felt something inside me shaking. The doctor's words kept echoing in my head. Treatment was expensive. Too expensive. One afternoon, Daniel found me staring at the medical bills spread across the table. I had been staring at them for so long that the numbers had begun to blur. He sat beside me quietly, waiting for me to speak, but I didn't have any words. I just felt empty. He finally told me he had an idea. He said he wanted to get a job. I tried to stop him. He was only a year older than me, and he had no home, no papers, no experience. But he insisted. He said he couldn't just sit and watch my mother suffer. He said he owed us everything. The next morning, he left early to look for work. I watched him walk away from the window, the same window where I had first seen him. I felt like I was losing him, piece by piece, to a world that had already taken too much from him. Hours passed with no sign of him. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, cooking, and caring for my mother, but every sound outside made my heart beat faster. When the sun finally began to set, I heard the door open. Daniel walked in, exhausted, with dust on his clothes and bruises on his hands. He had found a job at a construction site. They paid little, but it was something. When he told me, my chest tightened. I didn't want him to work in a place that could hurt him, but I also knew we needed the money. I hated that life pushed him into danger for our sake. Every evening after work, he came home tired, but he still smiled at me. And every time he smiled, guilt twisted inside me. He was suffering because he cared too much. A week later, everything suddenly changed. I was giving my mother her medicine when Daniel rushed in, holding his side, his face pale. He collapsed onto the floor before I could reach him. In that moment, the hope I had been holding on to slipped through my fingers like sand. When Daniel collapsed, the sound of his body hitting the floor felt louder than anything I had ever heard. I dropped the medicine bottle and ran to him. His skin was cold and his breath was uneven, sharp, like every inhale was a fight. I kept calling his name, but his eyes wouldn't open. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial the emergency number. The ambulance arrived quickly, but the ride to the hospital felt endless. I held Daniel's hand the whole time, afraid that if I let go, he would disappear. His fingers were weak, barely responding to my touch. The paramedics spoke in low, urgent voices, and every word they said made my heart sink deeper. At the hospital, they rushed him into a room and didn't let me go with him. I stood outside the door, frozen. My mother was still at home, sick and alone, but I couldn't leave Daniel. Not like this. I pressed my back against the cold wall and wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stay calm, trying not to fall apart. Minutes felt like hours. My mind kept replaying every moment we had spent together. His tired smile after work, his warm kindness toward my mother, the way he held my hand the night he promised he wouldn't leave me. I didn't realize how deeply he had become a part of my life until the thought of losing him hit me like a storm. A doctor finally came out. He told me Daniel had internal injuries caused by heavy lifting at the construction site. He had ignored the pain for days because he didn't want to worry me. Hearing that broke something inside me. He had been hurting, and I didn't see it. They kept him overnight for observation. I sat beside his bed, watching the machines beep softly. He looked so peaceful, almost like he was just sleeping, but the bruises on his hands told a different story. I gently held his hand and whispered that he wasn't allowed to leave. Not now. Not ever. My voice was quiet, but inside, I was screaming. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at me with a weak smile. He apologized for scaring me. I told him he didn't need to apologize. I told him he mattered. Maybe for the first time in his life, someone told him that. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, while Daniel was still recovering, I got a call from a neighbor. My mother had collapsed. She had tried to get out of bed, maybe to drink water, maybe to look for me, and her body couldn't handle it. The neighbor had taken her to the hospital too. I rushed to her room, my heart racing. She was lying on the bed, breathing slowly. She looked smaller than ever, fragile like a leaf in winter. I grabbed her hand and begged her to stay strong. I told her I was there, that Daniel was safe, that we were all together. She looked at me with tired eyes and smiled faintly. It was a smile full of love, full of goodbye. And in that quiet, heartbreaking moment, I felt the world split open. My mother's hand felt so light in mine, as if her strength was fading with every breath. I kept talking to her, hoping my voice would keep her here. I told her I needed her. I told her I wasn't ready. I told her that I was scared. But her eyes had a softness I had seen only a few times in my life. A softness that felt like she was already somewhere far away. The doctor came in quietly and checked her pulse. His silence was enough. I felt my throat close, and I held her hand tighter, as if I could keep her from slipping away. She looked at me one more time and smiled in that gentle way she always did when she wanted me to be brave. Then her eyes slowly closed, and just like that, she was gone. The moment her hand grew still, something inside me broke. The pain came fast, sharp, and overwhelming. I leaned over her and cried in a way I had never cried before. The kind of crying that shakes your whole body. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. The nurses tried to comfort me, but nothing they said could reach me. I felt like the world had become empty. I had lost the person who raised me, who loved me, who tried to stay strong even when her body was failing. I wanted her back. I wanted one more day, one more smile, one more moment. But life doesn't listen to our begging. Life just keeps moving. When I returned to Daniel's room, my eyes swollen and my heart shattered, he took one look at me and understood. Even though he was weak, he sat up and opened his arms. I went to him, and he held me as tightly as he could. I cried into his shoulder, and he just let me cry. He didn't tell me to be strong. He didn't try to stop my pain. He was simply there, and sometimes that is the only thing that keeps you from falling apart completely. The next weeks were a blur. The house felt painfully quiet without my mother. Every corner reminded me of her. Her clothes, her voice in my memories, even the chair she loved to sit in. Daniel stayed with me the whole time. He cooked, he cleaned, he helped with everything. But more than that, he made sure I wasn't alone. One evening, we sat together by the window where everything had started. The street was silent. The sky was turning the same golden color it had the day I first saw him. I felt the familiar sadness rise inside me, but for the first time, it didn't feel as heavy. Daniel looked at me and said he wanted to stay by my side, not because he felt he owed me anything, but because he cared, truly cared. Hearing that didn't erase my pain, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time, a reason to keep going. Losing my mother shattered me, but meeting Daniel saved me. He came into my life on a cold evening, under a lonely streetlight, and somehow became the person who helped me stand again. Life took something precious from me, but it also gave me someone who reminded me that even after the deepest pain, the heart can still learn to hope. Thanks for listening to my story. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe the channel and like the video. If you want, comment below.